Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Manisha, and today I'm going to be starting my April wrap-up. So I had an aggressively neutral reading month last month, but I'm so excited to talk about them. So last month I read 7 books, and I had 2 DNFs. So the first 2 books I read were part of the Addicted Calloway Sisters series. So I read Ricochet on audiobook, and then I read Addicted for Now, and I personally just found I have a hard time connecting with the characters and just the writing style and storytelling method. So I didn't really rate these books, they were just kind of for funsies. But I did DNF Addicted for Now. I read at least 20%, but I don't remember exactly. I just kind of just dropped it. I was like, maybe I'll come back to it later. But yeah, that series is more like something I just pick up randomly when I see people I like talking about it, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really good, and I forget that I just don't vibe. But moving on. The next book I read was A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, and I have been reading this book on and off since January, so if that doesn't tell you what my mental state is about this book, I don't know what will. But I finally finished it off. I gave it a 2.5 because frankly, I don't know how you make a tournament trope boring, but that's exactly what happened here. And I love a tournament trope. I eat at the tournament trope every single time. I love it so much. But it was so boring. It felt like it became almost like a side plot in this book, and it was more just a mechanism to introduce a bunch of characters for the lead up into the next book or the final book. It was not for me. It was just so boring. It was so aggressively boring. But I finished it, and I will finish the last for the reason that I bought them all when I thought I was going to love this trilogy and just vibe with it very heavily. And then I read Just for the Summer. So this book was very highly anticipated for me because last month I read Part of Your World and then I read Yours Truly. And those were a 5-star and a 4.75. So I had incredibly high hopes. And I find when that happens, the book tends to let me down a little bit. And that was kind of a trend last month. So I'll start with the positives. I think that the friendships in this book were phenomenal. I love the male friendships between Justin and his friends, and they're just such acts of service, just there to care for him and help him through this tough time that he's going through. Love that for him. Phenomenal, fabulous. I loved that Emma had such a ride or die friend that just truly understood her and wanted the best for her and kind of called her out on perhaps some lapses in judgment. So love that. Incredible friendships. And there were definitely some straight up banger quotes, amazing, underline worthy, highlight worthy. There was very cute moments. But I unfortunately didn't resonate with this book as much as previous works. I just felt like I didn't feel a lot of chemistry between the main characters. And they had amazing banter. So like I don't know why I didn't particularly feel the chemistry, but it was just not there. Like, and it's so difficult to put my finger on it. I think it's maybe just the way that the story was told. Someone was mentioning that the book was told a little bit more like 50-50 in terms of literary fiction and romance. And so perhaps there wasn't enough like build up for me personally to feel the chemistry between the 2 main characters because we focus so heavily on their kind of life circumstances. And speaking of life circumstances, I just felt like the issues that Justin was going through with his family, yes, we see a little bit of it play out, but it kind of got sidelined in my opinion. Like Emma was the main character and like her problems and her resolution were the key point and focus of this book. That's just how I felt. And so it just ended up just being sidelined. And that's fine if it was one POV. But because we're getting dual POV, I need equal care in both characters. You can't just... I also just wish that the resolution to the 3rd act conflict was a little bit more drawn out. And I just felt it was a bit rushed and just kind of brushed under the rug. And maybe Abby Jimenez did do a more emotional, drawn out resolution and it just didn't flow well with the story. I'm not a writer. I don't personally know how it would play out. But that's just something I wished as a reader, that we had a more emotionally deep resolution to their conflict and then, you know, in romance books, there's usually like this kind of unique quirk that authors give to characters or to the story. But I'm sorry, Toilet King is disgusting. What? Who okayed that? That's literally just not okay. And then, speaking of disappointment, well, I don't want to say that, but I did read Ninth House last month, and it was a 5-star. I loved it. I thought the storytelling, the world building, all of that was phenomenal. But then I read Hellbent, and I went in with a little bit of a reservation because I didn't know if it could hold up to how much I loved Ninth House. And, you know, I don't want to delve into spoilers, but I think that the goal of this book just took a little too long to achieve. And I fully understand that based on the title, I should have put 2 and 2 together, that the entire book would be based on that or surrounding kind of resolving that issue. But I just did not think that it was going to take that long. And it was kind of annoying. And speaking of annoying, I just felt like the obstacles to that goal were just so tedious. I don't need to see that much trial and error. It makes sense in the context of like the magnitude of what they're trying to do, but it just took too long. I was getting lost in the weeds. And I know that a lot of people were saying this was fast paced, but this felt like the slowest book ever. And more kind of, one of those things that just really bothered me about this book was that it was so disconnected from the setting. I feel like what I really loved about Ninth House was that the characters and kind of the problems were specific to the setting, and the people in that setting kind of interacted with whatever problem was happening. So, for example, if there was a ghost and it was attacking someone, then, you know, people are at least seeing that person getting attacked if they're not seeing the ghost. But this just felt so disconnected. Like, there was just full-on things in this book that could have hurt other people or students or professors or whatever on campus, and they really didn't. They were just going straight after our main characters, and I just felt like that just took me out of the plot. I was like, this could happen anywhere. This could be in a neighborhood. This could be at your local recreation center. Like, it's just not, like, it just didn't really matter that it was at Yale. Like, it just kind of unmoored the setting from the plot, and I just didn't like that because I loved it so much in Ninth House, and then leaving that behind, it was just a little too rough. I don't know what it was. This book felt so much like setup for the third book. I feel like I don't want to say nothing happened, but not a lot really happened in this book, to be honest. And maybe, again, I will look back on this book and think, wow, so much happened, so much was set up that I didn't even realize, and I'll gain a newfound appreciation for this book. But right now in this moment, that is not what's happening. But we'll see. I rated this book 3.25, which is a pretty good rating for this book, or for any book, but I just went in expecting a 5, so it was a little disappointing. Okay, and then the next book I received was The Ministry of Time. I was lucky enough to get an ARC of this book back in April, and I believe it's actually coming out today. It's May 9th today, which, amazing, happy release day. I don't want to put out my opinion because it's not necessarily positive, but it's not terrible. I think I just went into this book believing that it was going to be a different type of book. I thought it was going to center more of a kind of funny, found family cast of characters that all kind of grow closer and just find comfort in each other and companionship in each other. And that wasn't really what it was. This book takes itself a little bit more seriously. Just the way that the author writes is not quite as lighthearted as I had expected it to be. So, I don't know. I think if you go into that book knowing it's a little bit more serious, you definitely have a stronger chance than I did of liking this book. So definitely give it a chance. I then received another ARC. Luckily, NetGalley was just spoiling me last month. I received Fragile Animals by Genevieve Jaeger, or Jagger. I am so sorry. I don't know. But this book started out really strong. It was a very, very strong 4 stars for me when I was starting out. I really just was vibing with the characters and the writing style. The writing took me like a chapter or two to get into, but once I was in it, I was just flowing. It was very atmospheric, and I liked it a lot because the character was just so regular, but like mysterious. I think it's best to go into this book without knowing anything really, besides that it's a kind of late 20-year-old woman who is reconciling with her Catholic upbringing and her upbringing itself. And there's a crusty, dusty, musty, disgusting vampire. But, other than that, I don't think you really should know too much about this. And I don't want to really influence you one way or the other in terms of how you should perceive this book. But definitely check it out. It's a little weird. It's a lot weird. I don't know. If you're open to that little blurb, definitely give it a try. I think it's a very interesting book. But again, I didn't realize how crusty, dusty, musty the vampire was gonna be. And that kind of dropped my rating from a 4 to a 3. And then I also felt that the kind of major event that we were leading up to talking about in the main character's life was a little underwhelming. Personally, I think it just took a little too long to get to it. And then when we got to it, I was like, okay, I can see that this had a large impact in your life, but the actual event was not that not that shocking. Especially based on what we learned before or as they're going through the book. Okay, and then I read Binding and Keeping 13. Literally my children, my babies, my favorite books, my favorite series. My favorite books are book 3 and 4. But this story is just so like, I love it so much. It just makes me feel all the feels. I literally think about this book all the time. It's just such a perfect blend of the darkness that can happen in your life and like those amazing connections that you make with people and how they can be those people that bring you out of dark situations and bring light into your life and remind you that good things can still happen to you. It's just so good. And even better, I got the physical books and I learned that the publishers kind of fixed some things in the book. And so some of the language that was not correct, not nice, not polite, has been removed and kind of changed. And so I feel much more comfortable recommending it, because before I would have to kind of give a disclaimer of, this book says a lot of things that I don't agree with. I don't think the majority of people agree with, but it's written in 2005 and the vernacular reflects that. And you kind of have to just look past that because the story is much deeper than the way that these teenagers are talking to each other. But they changed a lot of it. Like, it's still there. The essence of 2005 is there. And so if you're very conscious of the way that people are talking, or you are more sensitive perhaps to certain words, perhaps skip this, but I think it's such an absolute banger. I don't know what I was thinking. The first time I read these 2 books, I rated the first one 4.5 and the second one 4.75. They're both 5-star reads. I don't know what past me was thinking. And this was only like 6 months ago. I'm just on my reread again. But they're both 5 stars. This entire series is like a 6-star read for me. I love them so much. And I will be reading Saving and Redeeming 6 this month, of course. The final book I read in the month of April was Funny Story by Emily Henry. And going into this book, I had already watched a few TikToks of people who had received ARCs and had kind of developed a little bit of an impression of what this book was going to be like. There was a specific creator, I don't remember what her name is. I will tag the TikTok I'm talking about below and I'll put the creator's name right here. But she was saying that this book was very struggle love, and she finished the book and was like, if you're happy, I'm happy, but wouldn't want that for myself, or something along those lines. And then everyone in the comments was saying that this man's reminded them of, oh my gosh, what's his name? Nick Miller. And I'm sorry, maybe I didn't watch all of New Girl to appreciate Nick Miller, but Nick Miller is like an ick for me. Like, I really don't like him. I don't like incompetence. It's an absolute ick for me. I hate it so much. It's not for me. So going into that, the bar was just in hell for Miles's character. And I'm going to say that he wasn't as bad as I expected. Miles was definitely not Nick Miller level. He was competent and able to actually do things, which was a giant relief. And then I thought, Emily Henry wouldn't write an incompetent main character, because who would want to read about that? So, that was a relief. And I think a giant pro of this book, the writing was phenomenal. I could not stop reading this book. And that doesn't really happen for a lot of books for me. I usually get a little bit of like reading fatigue. Like, I'll read for a long time on one day and then I'll have to like take a long break. But this was just consistent reading. This was like a page turner because the writing was just flowing so well in my brain and it was just so addictive. And that's truly just a testament to Emily Henry's writing, because I did not care about Daphne and Miles' relationship at all, because they had no chemistry. They both just had minor character development and then fell into a relationship, and I just didn't sense any chemistry. There was no reason for them to get together. I feel like they should have just remained besties, because then they could just help each other along this road of life and navigating these random things, supporting each other. There was no reason for them to get together. Like, I feel a bestie can just really help you out in life. You don't need to become lovers. That's just my personal opinion. That they would have been amazing friends. And they should have just remained friends. Okay, thank you for joining me in talking about the books that I read in the month of April. I would love to hear what you guys read last month and what you enjoyed, what you're planning to read this month. See you next time.